There's 4 different value kits coming out for Warhammer 40k this weekend, and this is the graph of which ones people are most looking to pick up. Between the new battle forces and the new combat patrols, can you guess which box goes where? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, but today I thought I'd do a bit of an overview of this weekend's releases. And for something a little bit different, I thought we'd try and drill into the numbers of these new Battle Force box sets, and maybe go a little bit further than I do sometimes before, just talking through a few numbers and my own opinions, but this time also talking through what people are actually looking to pick up, people's overall thoughts and popularity of the boxes, and also which box sets I'm going to be looking at myself and why, as I do have a sort of medium-sized army of both Orks and Custodes. This week has been a very busy week here on the channel with both the Orks and Custodes launches. There's been news of the new combat patrols and pricing of the battle forces. Everything is going live on Saturday the 13th of April, and then there'll be full release on the 27th of April. I'll certainly be hoping to keep a few more videos coming here, looking forward to doing a full review of Codex Adeptus Custodes. That hopefully should be around in the next 24 hours or so. Plus I'm kind of curious to see what sort of crazy numbers the Stomper can put out these days, so I might take a look at that in a video later. In any case though, for this video I thought I'd focus on the actual Custodes release. For pre-order tomorrow we've got Codex Orks and Custodes, the Auric Champions and the Stomper Boys Battle Forces, and Combat Patrol Adeptus Custodes and Combat Patrol Orks, all alongside their dice and datasheet cards. For this video I thought I might do a bit of a temperature check of these new releases, in particular see how people are reacting to the deals and battle force options and which ones people are actually looking to pick up, as well as which ones people might rate as best, and some reaction to the new miniatures, new rules, and what I'm planning to do with my own armies. A lot of this comes from a quick poll on the channel. I thought it might be sensible to start out with asking whether or not the battle forces are likely to sell out, something I'm genuinely a little bit unsure about myself. When I asked people whether or not Games Workshop are going to sell out of these battle forces within a day, 60% of people said yes, around about 40% said no. I'm genuinely a little bit sure as to which way they'll go with this one. For Games Workshop's recent big launches, Kill Team Nightmare sold out in basically minutes. That does feel like a different sort of release though. Kill Team box sets never seem to get made enough. And otherwise this year we've had the Deathwing Assault box set, which was the launch one for the Dark Angels. The supply of that one was kind of low, though the Kroot box had far more availability and is still on sale from plenty of discount retailers around the world. That was kind of an interesting one, as Tau are a really popular faction, but I feel like Kroot appeal is a bit more niche within the Tau army. In any case, if you have absolutely decided that you do want one of these discount deals, it might well be worth being early on day of launch if you are going to buy one anyway. I wouldn't really let fear of missing out be the main thing that decides your purchases though. Here's just a rough breakdown of my discount retailer links in the video description and when their supplies of battle forces and combat patrol should be going live. For Wargame Portal over in the USA, it should be around midnight Central Time, they do a 15% off. For Element Games in the UK, it'll be 10 AM. They usually do a 10 to 20% discount, can be a little bit variable. For Gap Games in Australia, they usually do 21% off, which is rather nice. Their pre-orders will go live at midday Australian Eastern Standard Time, and I must admit Australia, it does look like your time zones are a bit of a mess. And then in Fenris Workshop in Canada, it's midnight Eastern Time. They usually do 10% off plus their loyalty scheme. All of those are links down in the video description. Anything bought through those does help to support the channel, whether it's big box sets or other things. In general, if you are looking to land one of the battle forces, maybe check out these guys first. If not, then fall back to local stores or any other discount retailers around the world. And then if everyone is running out of them really quite quickly, head to the Games Workshop web store where supply tends to be a bit better. They tend to go live at 10 AM in the UK, which would be 11 AM in sort of Western European time for France, Germany and Italy. For you guys over in the USA and Canada, it's usually 10 AM Pacific time or midday Central time, and again around midday Australian Eastern time. Let me know if I've made any errors with those time zones around the world. I thought it might be useful though just to try and coordinate a little bit, as I feel like these are the sort of timings that more engaged people might be fully aware of, but more casual players might not see. As always, a massive thank you for people choosing to buy through the links down in the video description though. It does help to support Auspex Tactics, and of course it saves you a fair bit compared with buying through the Games Workshop web store, which can add up to quite a lot given how expensive Warhammer models are. Whether or not we can actually get them aside, let's drill into the box sets themselves. Just for a very quick recap, the Stomper Boys are $210 or £125, a kit absolutely dominated by the big Stomper. You also get the new Big Mech, 10 looters and burners, a truck and 10 boys. The raw numbers on this thing do look kind of good. A 45% discount and over 1,000 points worth of orcs in the box. It really is very dependent on the Stomper though. Basically a box set where you'd probably buy if you want a Stomper, you probably wouldn't if you don't. The Custodes Battle Force is the same price. That one gets you the new Shield Captain with the Pyrothite Spear, 6 Alarus Custodians, 5 Wardens, and 6 Virtus Praetor jet bikes. The discount on this one versus buying separately is around about 40%, a tiny bit lower on paper than the Orcs, though still very good, better than most Combat Patrol box sets. This one's got even more points in the box, around about 1200 or so, even if you didn't build any other Shield Captains. Around about 5.7 points per dollar or so is really quite great by 40k standards, where most kits are 3 or less. Otherwise, for the Combat Patrols, we've got the new Orcs one. The Combat Patrols will be Games Workshop's normal prices, $160 or £95. The Orcs one is a Beast Snagger themed one, a Beast Boss with 20 Beast Snagger boys and 3 Squighog boys and the Knob. Currently, per the digital points, they'd be just shy of 500 points, though it does look like that might go down a tiny bit at least, given that the Knob's been rolled into the Squighog boys. I feel like you're not going to pay as much for him, given his stat line was reduced a bit. It's great if you want orcs of the Beast Snagger theme. I do think the models are really quite fun and suitably violent looking. I feel like this one's maybe a touch more divisive though, given that it's not really a more central start collecting orcs sort of box. You have to want a good amount of squigs and savage orc themed models in your army. Finally, for the discount kits, we've got the Custodes Combat Patrol, the same standard Games Workshop Combat Patrol price. This one, if anything, was seen as a bit of an upgrade to some people on the old one, getting you a Blade Champion, 5 Wardens, 5 Custodian Guard and 3 Terminators. 14 big chunky and points intensive golden boys gets you a lot of force on the board. At least at time of recording, it gets you easily the most points out of any combat patrol in Warhammer 40k, around about 5 points per dollar, so a little bit lower than the Auric champions there. Though again, it could be higher than this given that you can build any of these units with extra shield captains if that made sense. The discount isn't as good as the Auric champions, only around about 30% off versus around 40%. And just in general, this is seen as quite a nice kit, I think. 3 of the mainline Custodes kits. I guess maybe the Blade Champion is one you might not necessarily want loads and loads of, but everything else you'd conceivably want in multiples, I think. They are about as top tier competitive as Custodes gets pre-Codex at least. In any case, those are the kits. I thought just to gauge people's opinions a little bit, I'd just ask people a few basic questions as to what releases they were most excited for, which ones they were looking to buy and pass up. Just for a bit of completeness, I thought I'd see how many people play Custodes and Orcs currently responding to the poll. I was going to weight it per numbers of players if they were very, very different, but it looks like the play rate of Custodes and Orcs, at least for channel viewers, is near enough the same. Orcs, of course, being a massively popular established faction that go back a long way, and Custodes being one of the easiest armies to get into for Warhammer 40k, with a fairly cheap and fairly nice range of new models, at least in my opinion. I'm not sure if these necessarily represent the entire play rate of these factions in Warhammer 40k more generally though. I feel like if you're a Custodes and Orcs player, you're more likely to respond to a poll about their miniatures. First up, for weighing up the value kits, I thought I'd ask people what's the best deal out of them by your vote. Realistically, you can run numbers on theoretical value or theoretical points in the box, though at the end of the day, the actual best deals are the ones that have the models that people actually want for the lowest price, so I think just general public perception is genuinely a good tool for this. It seems that the Custodes have the Orcs fairly convincingly beat here. About 70 odd people voted for the Custodes Combat Patrol, just over 50 voted for the Auric Champions Battle Force, a little bit behind. Kind of interesting to see that, given that it's potentially more points in the box and more discounts. My guess is it might be the extra 6 bikes in the box that might sway people against it a little. There have been kind of unexciting in 10th edition gameplay so far, which I think turns people off them a touch, plus people are likely to have at least a fair amount of them given that we've had access to the previous Custodes Combat Patrol for so long. As a result, I'm not really too surprised that discounted Blade Champions and Wardens and Terminators more focally gets the nod more. Otherwise, the Orky kits are generally not seen as quite as good a deal. It is kind of interesting that the Stomper Boys placed third quite significantly, 23 votes for that one. Kind of fun to see the disparity between public perception and the numbers here. It is a box that comes with the single biggest kit in Warhammer 40k plastic, and also has a theoretically bigger discount versus Auric Champions, and certainly lots more than the Custodes Combat Patrol. Though I feel like it might be rated a bit lower as it does come with some kits that are quite a lot older. The Looters, Burners and Shrug and Stomper all date back a fair way. Finally, Combat Patrol Orcs is definitely bringing up the rear here. I wouldn't dispute that really, it does feel like a downgrade compared with the previous Combat Patrol that has sort of similar models, but trade the knob on Smasher Squig for an entire Death Dread. It's easily the worst in terms of points for your money as well. For a contrast though, I thought it would be interesting to see what people are actually planning to buy out of the box sets. I think public perception as to how good the boxes are is one thing, but if people are reporting that they're actually going to buy the box anyway, it kind of shows they think it's at least a somewhat good deal or good enough to make the cut, even if they don't feel like they're getting the best deal in the entire world. Again, for the Custodies, it does look like the Combat Patrol is being rated significantly more than the Auric Champions Battle Force, perhaps more so if anything than the value perception poll. Looks like at launch weekend that one might actually be the most in demand out of any of these boxes as a result. I guess that one will return to circulation. I do wonder if it might go temporarily out of stock for a bit though, just due to better demand than probably any Combat Patrol in 10th edition so far, given that a lot of the rest have been kind of lackluster. Otherwise, interestingly, versus the perceived value, it looks like more people are looking to get a Stomper Boys box set versus Auric Champions. Kind of curious to see that flip there. I guess there's enough greenskin players who are wanting to embrace the life of the giant walking trash can. And to be fair, from some of the teased rules for the Stomper, it does look really quite savage in the Dread Mob. You could get quite a lot of shooting out of it, even if I'm not sure if it's still going to be the most competitive thing in the world. In any case, for box sets in demand, it looks like it is more so than the Auric Champions. And compared with the perceived value, it looks like people actually looking to pick up things as the Combat Patrol Orks box isn't really that far behind either. Certainly looks like it's going to be slightly less than half in demand versus the Custodies Combat Patrol, but still 23 of the respondents said that they wanted to pick one of those up. To be fair, it's still at least a reasonable discount on some pretty nice Ork models. If you don't have them and you enjoy the Beast Snaggers, then it still seems to be popular enough. Otherwise, just for a couple of peripheral things, I was interested to see what the split would be on voting for the best miniature out of these two. The Orcs got the Big Mech, which I'd argue seems to be kind of underwhelming with the rules, and the Custodians have their Shield Captain, who rules-wise I'd probably rate as the optimal way to run a Shield Captain now if you want one, though there's far fewer battle tactic stratagems going around it would seem. I'm honestly in no way surprised by the split here. 138 people rated the Mech as the better miniature, only 23 the Shield Captain. And I personally agree with that myself. I think the Cyborg Mech is really quite fun. I like his stompy exo frame, plus big crackling guns and teleport thing. And reception to the Custodian Shield Captain really wasn't great. Lots of people saying that he's just looking a bit too squat, not the best posing, and maybe is reminiscent of a Leagues of Votan miniature. I do perhaps feel like the stock image of the Custodian's Captain probably wasn't doing him too many favours though. I think he does look a little bit better from this angle. This one coming from Games Workshop showing off one of their employees' paint jobs for him today. I feel like it looks maybe a little bit better from that angle. It still feels like he's maybe looking rather stout. I think it's mainly due to his stance with his legs being quite so wide apart. I think the paint job's kind of fun for this one as well. A nice bit of red on the shield I think really is cool. Otherwise, we've had really quite a lot of leaks and teasers for Orcs and Custodians around on the internet recently. This was a kind of obvious one, but again I thought it was worth highlighting. For the Codexes, I asked which one of the rule sets looks more interesting or best. We got 137 votes for Orcs, 19 for neither of them particularly, and 9 for Custodians. I'm not sure there's any debate here that Orc players are a lot more excited about their Codex release than the Custodians players are. Orcs got a whole load of fun and some of them looking really quite powerful detachments, Custodians generally getting massive nerfs, the index detachment losing power, lots of datasheets losing power, and just in general at current points cost looks like it could be enough to make the Custodians turn from a really strong army into a really weak army, at least until they have the chance to do a balance pass. Hard to say that for sure at this point though, of course, given that we don't know the digital points, but even if they were weirdly cheap models to compensate for less exciting rules, I think it's hard to deny that the Orcs got a lot more interesting faction rules versus Custodians. With that in mind though, it still seems that the majority of players of both armies are looking to pick up their Codex. It looks like for the Orcs it's 38%, the same amount of people who said that they were playing the faction interestingly enough. For Custodians it looks like it might genuinely have put some people off. It was a similar sort of number saying they played Custodians as Orcs, but not quite as many are reporting that they're going to pick up the book. I still think it's maybe not too surprising though that the majority of Custodians players still are. It is a codex and sort of needed to play the faction in Warhammer 40k unless you're going entirely by Warhapedia and stuff. And I do feel like there's something to be said with sticking with your armies through thick and thin, rather than only remembering that you're a Custodians player when they're super powerful. In any case, that's the majority of internet takes. I thought though for this video I'd do something just a little bit different, seeing as I do have a small army of both factions. Two very different armies, quite an old force of around about 3,000 points or so of Orks, and a newer force of around about 1,500 to 2,000 points worth of Custodes, at least the ones I've got painted. I did post a few pictures of these guys on the channel a little while in the past. I have quite enjoyed painting them up. My main idea was to try and make a force that I could paint at least somewhat speedily, using some heavy use of dry brushing and contrast paints, where I often tend to go for things like hard edge highlighting. I, like a fair few people, was tempted to get into the army with that Watch at the Gate Christmas Battle Force set a couple of Christmases ago now, just thinking that that could basically be the majority of a 2,000 point army just then and there, and could be an option to try something a bit different. In general, I'm quite pleased with how they've turned out. I've been trying to go for a sort of metallic purple sort of colour that people are always telling me looks like Emperor's Children, contrast purple over metallic paints, and then use dry brushing to execute most of the rest. The gold, leather, and white can all be done quite quickly that way. I thought, seeing as I'm literally building a Custodes army gradually at the moment, it might be worth it to some people to just get my take on what I'm doing with the force. Currently I've got the Watch on the Gate Battle Force box set, that's all painted up now, plus 2 copies of the 9th edition Combat Patrols, one of them fully completed, the other one half done. So a good amount of bikes, a good amount of Custodian Guard, and a fair amount of Sisters of Silence. I did also pick up a Blade Champion kind of recently, which is now a slightly regretted purchase given that the Combat Patrol set contains them, and so far I've chosen to hold off on any Forge World models or proxies for them. I have a feeling at some stage Games Workshop is going to do the Forge World range in plastic, though I'm not sure how far away that is. For my initial takes on the new sets, I was originally going to get the Auric Champions. I think it was good enough to make the cut for me. And as with a few people, the main thing that I was a little bit unsure on was how much I really wanted 2 units of extra bikes, since they reduced the max squad size on them. I've already got as many as you can field, barring shield captains and things, so I might have had to resell those sprues. Maybe wouldn't have been against another 3 to field some shield captains alongside some bikes, if for some reason it made sense to in the future, though I feel like that they were the sticking point of the box. Certainly the main thing that drew me to the box given my current collection were the Terminators and Wardens, and the Shield Captain I thought was interesting enough, but I could go kind of either way on. I think I don't outright hate the sculpt, but I'm not in love with it either, and I suspect I'll just wind up converting one with a melter gun on a spear, and maybe try and find some sort of suitably fancy shield to pair it with. When the new Combat Patrol was announced last weekend though, I must admit I changed plans. It was pretty much exactly what I wanted, a box set focusing on the Terminators and Wardens, as I don't actually have any of the Wardens yet. And while it would mean I'd be going a bit heavy on the Custodian Guard, I feel like 35 isn't the worst, particularly as I've been assembling them around about half-half shields versus Guardian Spears to be a bit more protected against addition changes and things, plus having a few options as to whether or not to field Vexillas. Maybe the Blade Champions are now the only slightly suboptimal thing in that. I might eBay one of the sprues potentially, given that I don't think I really need 3. Not really against having 2 though, if it happens to make sense for a given army. I'd say though if you didn't already have bikes, then the Battle Force box set seems okay. I know they're not particularly exciting in rules right now, but given that Games Workshop's changing points and rules fairly constantly, it does feel a bit short-sighted to me to say that they'll never be good again. I'm sure Custodians players kind of missed the major internet talking points over the last few days of just players being kind of unhappy about their rules, to put it mildly. I must admit from initial takes the Codex does just look kind of more boring versus the Index. You do get a choice of different attachments, but all of them seem like they've got less impactful rules overall in any one game. I guess at least you could vary things up game on game a little bit and try out a few of them, but it does kind of suck to take some datasheet nerfs, all alongside losing exciting options like resurrecting Custodes, +1 to wound monsters, the -1 damage stratagem, and the 4+ save against devastating wounds. In general though, it hasn't really put me off my stride too much with collecting Custodes. I'm personally going to stick with the theory of rules are temporary but cool models will endure, and for Warhammer 40k at least, Games Workshop doesn't seem to retire models, and they'll get new interpretations each new edition. I'm sure balanced data slates will try and even up things power-wise from one thing to the next. I feel like Games Workshop are unlikely to go all Stormcast Eternal on the Custodes, and perhaps more than that, throughout 10th edition so far, they really have demonstrated that they're capable of taking an underpowered army and making it far more interesting. Pre-Codex, we're already seeing Custodes at the top go down to the bottom and then rocket back to the top of the meta once more. The same for Drukhari, who had big problems with their index, which Games Workshop largely fixed by new rules and points adjustments. For that reason, I'm kind of happy just to keep on collecting them. Unless they do something very surprising with the points, I feel like the Custodes aren't going to be particularly strong for the next few months or so. Though if they really are at the bottom end of the meta, then it means they'll almost certainly get points adjustments or maybe even rules added in from a future balanced data slate, and Golden Boys players might be a little bit happier again. That's obviously just my take though, and I am lucky enough to have other armies that I can play for variety or strength when I need to. I can just keep the Custodians for more casual games in the interim. And I admit it might be a bit weird if they decide just to lower points massively to compensate. One way that they could try and make Custodians stronger is just to take 5 points off a whole bunch of their core infantry things. I genuinely think that you could add enough strength with points cuts to get them to be a top tier army again. But I feel like that kind of rarely goes down well, given that they'd just be super cheap. In any case though, certainly not trying to tell anyone what to think. That's just my own honest take as someone who's actively collecting the army right now. I certainly welcome any other takes down in the comments below. I know there's lots of disappointment about the Custodians currently. Otherwise though, I do have an Orks collection as well. The context of this one is that it started as a green tide back in 5th edition, and overall now I think I've got around about 250 odd Orks plus a whole bunch of Grots. Most of those are standard boys, with a fair few support units like fast movers like Storm Boys, Bikes, Knob Squads and Looters and Burners. My Orks have maybe been a little bit of a mothballed army. They were somewhat competitive back in 5th edition, though I've never really got to the point where I've really had them as my mainline central faction to play. I've just enjoyed playing them just very occasionally, maybe a few games each edition for more casual fun games. And rather than having them as my main focus for armies I've been building up, I've just been adding a few models to them here and there, mainly fun characters. I converted a couple of fun weird boys a little while back. Plus my latest addition was this beast boss on a Squigosaur. I just think the model's really quite fun for him. I've magnetised him up so he could be either the beast boss or Mozrog. And last game he tanked an entire army's worth of shooting, and then got in combat with a Lehman Russ and promptly failed to destroy it in combat for like 4 turns running. I'm enjoying the look of the Orks Codex, and it feels like there's several different ways I could have a go with the boys. The Green Tide really seems the obvious one for my collection. The Warhore's still going to be fine, plus Bully Boys could be interesting enough if I take a lot of bosses along. For the Ork Battle Forces, I don't think I'm going to pull the trigger on an enormous stomper. I was tempted by the Battle Force box set, but I feel like that would be quite a big undertaking, and I've got quite a lot of projects already on the go right now hobby-wise. I think my next purchase for Orks is going to be Swighog Boys in some sort of form to go alongside this guy. At the moment I'm a little bit undecided as to whether or not I'm going to get them via the Combat Patrol or not. It is nice to get a discount, and I do quite like the Beast Snagger Boys and things. I'm just not 100% sure if yet more Hordy Orks is the way to keep on expanding the army, rather than trying to add in a few more elements. And if there was an option I probably would have focused even more heavily on the cavalry, I guess. In any case, it will be fun to paint up some squigs to go alongside this guy, and I look forward to putting them on the table in some casual games. In any case, that's just a bit of an overview of the Orks and Custodians releases, both a few general takes from the internet and what people are most looking to pick up, plus my own thoughts as someone who has both armies, and at least had all the box sets on my radar, even if I suspect that most of them are a no on balance. Let me know which ones, if any, you're thinking about picking them up, or whether you're tempted to just skip out on them. Look forward to hearing Orks and Custodians players down in the comments below. As mentioned, here are the pre-order times. Hopefully a fair few of you do manage to pick up some of the sets who want them. And try and be early if you have decided ahead of time that you are pulling the trigger on one or more of them, and check out the links down in the video description below for discounts on Games Workshop, plus also supporting Auspex tactics and keeping the videos coming. In any case, I'll certainly be back with yet more videos, due to this being such a mammoth week in Warhammer 40k. Hopefully one of the next should be a full Custodians Codex review, so check back later if you'd like to see that, and unpick the new detachments and the damage. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel as well as those discount links, I do also have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help keep these coming. It is the main way that I can keep up this sort of level of content every single day as my full-time thing. If you have been enjoying a lot and your support is enormously appreciated, channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.